For those who I have met and I have not met, my name is Lizette Gonzalez. I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves when I pass along the presentation. I'm here to provide a quick update on public engagement, where we'll be for the next few weeks as we lead into our next MPC meeting next month. So tonight we actually have staff attending a Bike and Ped committee meeting just to gather their thoughts. We are also attending the parent-teacher organization at the school on Tuesday, so we'll be attending that and sharing information about the master plan. I also wanted to take some time to go over and maybe set some expectations and do a bit of a reset. I know last month's meeting was a bit of a rocky start, so I think we can take a step back and maybe ground ourselves in some guiding ideas, like, why are we doing the master plan and what role the MPC has, so that way we're clear on your expectations and how you interface with the whole process. So. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. So going back down to basics, what even is a master plan? This is a long-range plan, typically 10 years, that communities use to plan for the future. It's really based on 3 big pillars, and that's previous planning, data and trends, and I would say most importantly, public engagement, so community feedback. Next slide. I also want to remind us about what a master plan can and cannot do. And this distinction is really important because a master plan can gather ideas, and these can be broad or very specific, and set a goal for the town to implement these ideas. And a master plan, this is very important, cannot change policy, cannot set zoning, or make taxpayers liable for any type of spending. So essentially, a master plan, nothing is set in stone. Once we complete the plan, it is simply a wish list. And in fact, any items that are included in the master plan as goals or strategies still need to go through the traditional process. So if we're proposing changes to any type of zoning, they still need to go through the planning board, they still need to go through town meeting. None of that changes. Next slide. So what does this all mean in the context of the Acushnet master plan? So essentially, I want us to think of the Acushnet master plan as a wish list. This is a place where you can think about your hopes and your dreams, and what type of town you want to raise your kids in, and maybe where they want to raise their kids. And I remember someone at our last meeting used this phrase as well, hopes and dreams. So I really want us to think about the master plan as a wish list. And because the master plan is a wish list and sets no formal decision making, I want to encourage you to think big. Sometimes people are afraid to suggest certain ideas because it's expensive or it's really hard to implement, but this is actually the perfect place to do that type of thinking. Again, this plan doesn't set any type of formal decision making, so we want to think big on this and worry about implementation in the aftermath, because there are 1,000 solutions to one problem. The last thing I want to remind you is that the Acushnet Master Plan is a new wish list based on our experiences from today in 2025, I'm so sorry. I remember last meeting, I think I heard a little bit of discussion about going back and reading the 2008 plan and copy and pasting and updating. That's not what we're doing with this process. We are still referencing old plans. Next slide. And if you look here, we have a list of all the plans that are informing the master plan. So the 2008 master plan, the 2011 OSRP, the HPP. Acushnet has been busy over the last few years, and we want to take all of that into account instead of just looking at the 2008 master plan. So it's hard to plan for the future if we're looking that far back. So this is a whole fresh process. Next slide. And before I hand it off to Joe and Sarah, I also want to, again, set those expectations for the master plan committee. You guys have a really important job, and that's to consider the information that we're sharing at these meetings, what we're calling deep dives. And this is, where we share data and information and gather your insights. And hopefully you're getting this information ahead of time to review it, to get some ideas going, so that way we can have a real discussion about it. We also want you to advocate for this plan when you're attending events for the master plan that tells people that there's a captive audience. When you're sharing things on Facebook that is telling people, oh, my neighbors are interested in something because I can share it, but they don't know who I am, and they're more likely to respond to something from you guys. And lastly, I want to make sure that the MPC is a place where people can come and voice their opinions and have a discussion, because we're going to have a difference of opinions, and that's okay. That's the whole point of this process. Next slide. And then I also want to talk about how the MPC interfaces with all the other feedback that we have going on with the master plan. Though the committee is critical to the development of this plan, it is not the only piece of what I like to call our feedback puzzle. Surveys are one thing, tabling at public events are another, interviews with department heads. So all of that really serves to paint a picture of what the Acushnet master plan wish list is going to be. And you know, we compare the ideas we hear at the MPC with the ideas that we hear at tabling events or other public events with the outcomes of the survey. So at the end of this process, we're able to put together and generate something to present to you. So that way you can tell us, yeah, that sounds right, or maybe we need to tweak it a little bit. So all of this feedback is currently ongoing and will be continuing through the end of June. And we want to let everyone have an opportunity to share those ideas before we propose any items for that wish list. So, next slide. So I have a schedule here just of kind of what you can expect for the process of the Master Plan Committee over the next few months, and the last couple, though I know it's been a little non-traditional because of the structure, we are going to be covering different topics of the Master Plan. And through sharing those trends, data, information, the information from all those previous plans, which we're actually going to be doing that tonight, you can tell us, yes, all of that makes sense. Those draft goals and strategies will be presented to you in June, and then you'll be able to truth check us and let us know if we got it right or if we got it wrong. And then we'll take a break in the summer because we won't have new materials to share with you, but we'll be using that time to write the draft goals and strategies. And in the fall, we'll share drafts of those chapters where you can read the full details of all those goals and strategies and make edits as we continue through the creation of the final plan. So that's just an overview of what this process is supposed to look like, how the public engagement interfaces not only with the MPC, but all the other avenues that we have out there to get this going. And hopefully it sets a new tone for the MPC moving forward. So if you have any questions, please let the chair know, and I'm happy to answer anything.
Any questions thus far?
I was just curious, I saw on one of the slides, municipal vulnerability plan in 2020. What was that? Was that done by you guys?
Joe, you would know.
Viro did it, I think.
Okay.
I'm not sure. That was before.
Okay. I don't know if that came into play with the OSRP, but totally okay. So the municipal vulnerability plan, if you want to slide back to that section, that is, do you want to explain what the concept of a MVP is?
I'd love to talk about MVP. Yeah, it's my area of expertise. So municipal vulnerability preparedness, it's a beautiful type of grant offered by the Commonwealth. Typically, that pot of money is $25 million every year. The previous year was an exceptional year, $50 million. You should know that the new rules say small towns and rural communities are privileged. They have reduced requirements, zero match. They might even get off the hook in terms of upfront funding, because this is a reimbursable type of grant. And there's so many ways you can use it. You can use it for planning or implementation, nature-based solutions, green infrastructure, fixing flooding problems, water quality. But you can even use it for land acquisitions, for conservation purposes, conservation restrictions. So go to the EEA website, check out MVP later.
And specifically for the Acushnet MVP, that really focused on looking at the summary here talks about shortcomings with water and wastewater infrastructure. So they were able to identify which areas were most susceptible to impacts from that, and provide solutions and potential implementation funds after.
Excellent. I'll check that out.
Okay. What's everybody looking at me for? Are there any other questions as of right now? All right, moving on.
All right, so my name is Joseph Monet. I am Homeland Security Specialist and Comprehensive Planner at Serpent.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Singh, Principal Environmental Planner at Serpent.
So we're going to be doing a presentation on the Water Resource Management Plan, and we're going to be covering what a Water Resource Management Plan is, and then we're going to, as part of the Water Resource Management Plan, we're going to be looking at 5 different main topics, which is going to be water resources, wastewater, drinking water, stormwater and flooding, and then the reservoir that's in town, which Jamie wanted to highlight in this plan. So just real quick, what is a Water Resource Management Plan? There's 3 different types of specific plans in that Massachusetts outlines. The type of plan we're going to be doing is an integrated water resource management plan. I know somebody brought up the previous plan that was done within the town. So that's this big document sitting on the table right here. So this is an engineering report. This is a comprehensive wastewater plan that only looks at wastewater. So we're going to use this report to really build out our wastewater section of the water resource management plan. But an integrated water resource management plan is much more comprehensive and goes over all things water. So we're going to be looking at different uses of water, such as drinking, industry, and environmental water resources. The main goals are to protect the environment, support economic growth, and enhance human health.
Developing the Acushnet WRMP is part of the master plan process. The open space and recreation plan is also part of that process, so you can think of it as a triple project. Through the WRMP, Acushnet can accommodate growth, preserve community character, and make sure that there continues to be opportunities for recreation, for enjoyment of the water resources, for residents' quality of life. So there are 4 main goals that we're structuring your WRMP around: quality, quantity, ecological health, and enjoyment. Quality refers to not just water quality in water bodies, but also the drinking water supply. And that involves adopting best practices and innovations in regards to stormwater, wastewater, and water supply management. Quantity refers to providing an adequate supply of clean drinking water for the long-term demands of Acushnet residents, but also making sure that we balance with ecological needs. We don't want to draw too much, so that means ensuring groundwater recharge, healthy stream and river flows, and proper natural drainage in the right places. Ecological health refers to restoring optimal conditions in the Buzzards Bay watershed, biodiversity, intact habitats, and healthy fisheries. Enjoyment refers to equitable access to a variety of recreational activities while avoiding the adverse impacts.
So our first section is just going over water resources. So we have a few maps here. Wetlands, mostly in Acushnet, the classified wetlands are freshwater forested and shrub wetlands, which are a fancy way of saying swamps. That's mostly what Acushnet is made up of. The remaining wetlands are classified as mostly freshwater emergent wetlands, which are associated with the Acushnet River and the New Bedford Reservoir. Pretty much just wetlands that are around bodies of water. The town also has a small area of estuarine and marine wetlands at the southern edge of town, which is where the Acushnet River dumps into Buzzards Bay. The major areas are down by Tinkham Pond Water Resource and then Hathaway Swamp up here. You can't really see my cursor over there, but also BioCore habitat components are designed to identify and protect areas critical for long-term persistence of rare species, which Acushnet has a few of. northern red-bellied cooter, eastern box turtle, and coastal swamp arthropod. Aquatic core mostly have to do with the Acushnet River and the reservoir. Wetland core are key wetland habitats that support diverse species. Forest core are large continuous forest areas important for forest-dependent species, mostly down by the Tinkham drinking water supply at the southern edge of town.
So what's the big purple blocks?
Those are rare species core.
It's like habitat stuff?
Yeah, habitat, like large continuous landscapes for pretty much these species to be able to move around. And this layer is the same thing, highlighting biomap critical natural landscape components, which pretty much they just take out and they make these big blocks of land that are critical areas to enhance connectivity and resilience. Pretty much in Acushnet, there's the water core buffer, which just follows the entire Acushnet River, and then on the right side of town, there is the Tinkham Pond drinking water resource.
Would you say, is it fair to say the gold colors that you have here, the purple colors that you had on the previous map, if you overlaid them on top of each other, is it fair to say that that would all be considered non-buildable? Not developable?
It would be recommended, like legally, I do not know, it would be recommended not to develop on those.
Okay.
Legally, I do not know, because these are, biomaps aren't, they don't have like anything to do with really legislative, but when it comes to that, with development.
Okay.
And then aquifer, so there's one the Acushnet River and then reservoir, there's one big aquifer under there. So aquifer is just where groundwater is stored. Mass DEP aquifers classify underground water sources based on their yield. So high yield is greater than 300 gallons per minute, which are essential for large scale water supply needs. Medium yield is between 100 and 300 gallons per minute. Significant for smaller communities and certain industrial uses. And then low yield is 50 gallons per minute. These generally are used for private wells and small scale water needs. And we'll get into more on drinking water. 40% of the town is on aquifer. So this is pretty much where they're getting their water from if they're on well water. And then these are the priority protection areas. So this is a regional plan that Serpent did. So these areas were chosen by each community, and they have a number of purposes. The ones we're going to be focusing on are the protection areas, which are the big green areas. Important for habitats, creating recreational areas, highlighting areas of historical and cultural significance, and increasing resiliency to waterfront areas. So these 5 areas, you have the big area going through the middle of town, which is the Green Belt Aquifer and Protection Area, which is the Acushnet River and the New Bedford Reservoir. Purpose is to protect aquifers, possible well sites. The reservoir, which is mostly to preserve drinking water supply through the aquifer. The Hathaway, Swamp, and Green Belt link, purpose to preserve open space and provide continuous linkage to the Green Belt. The Tinkham Pond water resource to preserve drinking water supply. And then down by the riverfront access to preserve areas along the Acushnet River.
What is that Hathaway, the second one? Yeah, that one?
Hathaway Swamp.
What area is that?
So that's
Like, can you blow
just
it
the
up?
Hathaway Swamp. This is yeah, I gotta this. So this is all chapter 61A land in here. So this is automatically protected. This is privately owned in here.
It's behind DWY, the Haas.
Oh, that's not, yeah, that's, so I was just wondering, because it goes so far down, there's a proposed solar field that goes in there, right? Park Drive, Seacow. Yeah. And they got it as protected, but they're putting in a giant solar field, looks like. Can't see the streets right there, but. Later we can get some, take a look at that.
All right, so for our second section, this is wastewater, and pretty much all the information taken for this section was taken out of this big plan here. So Acushnet owns and operates a sewer system that services approximately 1,000 users in the most densely populated areas of town. So that's Main Street and South Main Street. These black lines are the existing gravity sewer right here. It's really blurry up here on the screen right now, but Acushnet sewer system dates back to the 1920s when the town partnered with New Bedford to develop an interconnecting system of sewer drains to take advantage of the area's natural topography. Today, this drain pipe system is divided between two distinct sections of town. The northern system is a conventional gravity-fed sewer, while the southern is a low-pressure system designed to transport sewage by means of pumping stations. The municipal sewer collection system consists of 8.3 miles of gravity sewer pipe and force main, 220 sewer manholes, 4 municipally owned wastewater pump stations. The Department of Public Works owns and operates the Allen Street, Slocum Street, Elderberry Drive, and School Department pump stations. Acushnet currently sends 185,000 gallons per day to the New Bedford wastewater treatment plant. Based on the existing IMA, the city of New Bedford bills the town for the treatment of wastewater according to the number of gallons recorded at the Slocum Street pump.
Comprehensive wastewater management plan. 5 years ago, back in 2020, Woodard and Curran completed the CWMP and proposed a potential septage management plan and 6 priority areas for the town to extend sewer over a 20-year period. The CWMP proposed the following: installing 62 miles of sewer main, constructing 6 new pump stations, expanding the existing Slocum and School Street pump stations. New sewer would be constructed based on need and occurrence of septic failure. The 20-year plan would send an additional 805,000 gallons per day of wastewater when it reaches full build-out, and that would result in a total of 990,000 total gallons per day. Because remember, we're adding on top of the existing 185K gallons per day.
And that table that is right here, so that's these highlighted area, the needs area of 1, 2, 3. I don't know if you guys can see it on the paper a little bit better. We're trying to work on getting the GIS data for this stuff from Woodard and Curran, but right now we just have the pictures of the map in the plan right now.
And now for water treatment. Oh, yes?
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. So on this page with the sewer table of needs, these areas of need, so was number 2 supposed to be from here at the police station down to Nice Lane, or is that another area originally?
It's funny because when we did the CWMP, they identified the South Main Street corridor to the Faven line, but then they swapped it because they felt it would be easier to get this area from the PD, right over here off the side street where we tied in the PD, down to Nice Lane. They swapped the 2 priority areas because of the reason why we were deterred from doing it over there was ledge. On the south side of town, there's a massive amount of ledge. The last sewer phase that they did, somewhere around 2006, 2008, they had an abundance of ledge going through there, and they had to come back and get some more money, and they upped the betterment. It wasn't significant when they upped the betterment. It was probably $500 to each household, but it was because of the way they did the borings. And for some reason, when the engineering company did the borings, which was a hard to believe story for me back in the day when I was on FinCom, is every time they did a boring, they fell into a valley. Which is kind of hard for me to believe that. Just your luck, you fell into a valley every time you did a boring. But that was the case back then. And when they were trying to run the pipe, they kept smashing into ledge. So they got false readings on their first boring, so they had to come back for more money, which impacted those sewer users that were on that phase.
So this area here, the reason why it hasn't been looked at yet is because of the cost?
I don't know if it's because of the cost or just not an appetite. It's not like everybody's jumping up and down saying bring me sewer, although I've heard, because this is my area of town where I reside, I've heard from a number of people that they would love to see sewer, and then I've heard from a number of people that said we don't want nothing to do with that, my septic system's fine, and I'd rather spend $200 every 3 years to pump it and
Right.
connect it to sewer, right? So it's a balance that we would have to take and approach, quite honestly, because any any betterment, privilege or betterment fee would have to get sewer phased. In other words, would have to go to town meeting for a vote. And I've always argued that if we're gonna go for a sewer betterment privilege fee, then you better just invite the people that are impacted, because I don't think it's fair that we go to a regular town meeting and have people from the other side of town voting in sewer and stuffing it down 300 people's throats. So there's roughly on that 2 phases that this gentleman was identifying. So the South Main Street side, so it stops basically Paygot Street, where Custom Auto is, not Custom Auto, I'm sorry, Shaman Auto, right before the Century House. That's where it stops. And that phase is located from after Century House all the way down to Fairhaven Line, both east and west side of Main Street, in this phase over here.
So the other problem with this whole thing too is all this Buzzards Bay estuary and nitrogen problem. So, and somewhere along the line, something's gonna have to be done.
Yep, there'll be a breaking point at some point, depending on the conversation about these nitrogen systems, right? And where do we start? And so we, the Board of Selectmen, we had our MS4 engineer in the town, I don't know, somewhere around 6 to 9 months ago. And he was in here doing some stormwater surveys for us and testing on stormwater discharges, the big discharges that we have that dump into the river. Acushnet River, because a lot of stormwater basins tie into the river and then get discharged. So with all that nitrogen talk by the state in Buzzards Bay, I asked the engineer and the board endorsed the plan to have them test for nitrogen on all the outfalls at the Acushnet River, so we can be proactive, understand what our nitrogen loads are at our outfalls. So when they come yelling and screaming saying it's all you people from Acushnet in your homes, we have proof that it more than likely is not caused from us, right? So we did a big meeting at Council on Aging with Buzzards Bay, and it was over this nitrogen stuff. We were fortunate enough to have the Board of Health there as well. It was a joint meeting, and we basically told them, I know I remember speaking on that and telling them that before you come and try to knock everybody with a septic tank over the head with a baseball bat and spend $25,000, $30,000 just for the nitrogen, you know, load thing, that their little machine or whatever it is, a tank that they put in and install, that's really not even good for the freezing temperatures that we endure in New England. Before you do that, you might as well go to the 2 biggest discharges of sewerage, which is the New Bedford plant and the Fairhaven plant, that directly discharge into the harbor for nitrogen, right? You start with the big sources, measure it there and see what impact that's had on nitrogen. Come see us in 5 years before you whack all of us little people over the head for that nitrogen system. So we'll see where that goes, right? We don't know. I mean, you know, sometimes you have people stuff things down our throats. We all hear about unfunded mandates, right? That would be another example of an unfunded mandate.
Thanks for the background.
You're welcome, sir.
So here we are, we're looking at the water treatment process. How long can a human being go without clean drinking water? How many days? 3 days. Acushnet's IMA with New Bedford went into effect in 2005. It expired in 2010. No update, no new agreement. We're working on an expired agreement. It set the following conditions: maximum yearly allotment, 1 million gallons, average daily flow. And the water delivery rate was set at $13.26 per 1,000 cubic feet. According to the IMA, New Bedford is responsible for measuring the flow of water delivered to the buyer through approved metering devices that are calibrated and inspected regularly. New Bedford's Department of Public Infrastructure is charged with keeping all transaction records. Recently, Joe and I met with them and collected a lot of insights and took detailed notes on what they told us. Oh, Lizette was there too with us. Each community is responsible for the continued system operation and maintenance of their own water facilities. Town water versus well water. 40% of Acushnet's residents use on-site wells. The other 60% are provided water from New Bedford. Private wells are either 3 types: drilled artesian, shallow dug well, or driven point well. With increasing land development, more and more roads and driveways, that increased surface runoff can contaminate unprotected private wells. On-site septic systems are another key risk for contamination. All on-site water sources for new and existing households and businesses require approval from the Board of Health, and the Board of Health is the entity that evaluates the location and installation. Quitakas, right? Quitakas Water Treatment Plant.
Is that how you say it?
Quick.
Quiticus.
Quitakas.
It's good enough. It's close enough.
Okay. Quitakas Water Treatment Plant. Water from the city of New Bedford is sourced from a surface supply and treated at the Quitakas Water Treatment Plant after filtration, disinfection, corrosion control, and fluoridation processes. Currently, in the second phase of a 3-phased upgrade process. That's what DPI told us. The Quitakas facility annually processes over 4 billion gallons of drinking water for the region. The principal surface storage area for the city's water is Little Quitakas Pond, located in Rochester, but other ponds include Great Quitakas, Paksha, Assawamsett, and Long Pond, located in the towns of Freetown, Lakeville, and Middleborough. Acushnet's 2023 water quality report indicated 0 violations. Rest assured, the water supplied to Acushnet residents meets or exceeds state and federal requirements. Water billed versus water metered. In 2013, over 5.6 million cubic feet, almost 20% of the water supplied by New Bedford to Acushnet went unaccounted for. That's $150,000 in lost revenue. Just that year. So something similar is happening every year. The discrepancy between the water supplied from New Bedford and the water metered in Acushnet is known as unaccounted for water, UFW. Variances are generally caused for 3 main reasons. Either it's physical losses due to pipe leakages, it could be losses due to illegal connections, or it could be losses due to water meter inaccuracy. Based on a 2014 DPW review from the Division of Local Services, the UFW in the system is mostly due to aging meters. They tend to have a 10-year lifespan, and after that, their capacity to accurately measure water flow begins to deteriorate. Stormwater and flooding.
Can I say
Yes.
something, so everybody and the people at home that are watching this, and give them a little update on that? So that water loss at 20% was 2013. Town meeting voters put the Board of Selectmen in charge of the DPW Board of, better known as the Board of Public Works, in 2014, and we took it over at that point. Our water loss now is anywhere between 11 and 13%. Much better than what it was then, and we don't know the reasons why the water, in 2013, the water loss was at 20%. We had a couple of years where we were up around 15%, and right now I think we're averaging somewhere, just call it 12 to 14%, which is a lot better than what we did. And as far as the aging meters, when the Board of Selectmen took over the Board of Public Works, we put in, and I initiated it on the board with members of the board, we put in a program where everybody gets a new meter every 10 years now. So there's a water fee bill on their bill. It's like $5 a quarter, and it pays for itself so that we can do that. So we replace over 300 meters per year, so that we replace them every 10 years. It's every 10-year cycle. So if you were to replace in 2020, somewhere around 2030, they'll be back at your house replacing the meter again. For that reason, they try to control as much as we can water loss. So the town's made significant progress in the last decade from where we were at versus that. So just for everybody at home, understanding what's going on, we don't have that. Sometimes we do, because we have water main breaks, because we do have an aging infrastructure, right? And when you have a water main break, you lose a lot of water at once. So there are those years where you might see spikes, It's mostly due to water main breaks, but thank you.
Thank you so much for that clarification. So it's not 20% every year, it's 12% now. Big improvement. Stormwater and flooding. What is MS4? MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems. And these are systems that collect stormwater through storm drains, pipes, and ditches and convey that to the appropriate location. Unlike combined sewer systems, MS4 systems are separate from sanitary sewers and they discharge stormwater directly into local water bodies without treatment. 30% of Acushnet's total area is regulated by the municipal separate stormwater sewer system. And 63% of the town's population resides within that MS4 regulated area. In the town's MS4 reporting, the main pollutants identified are bacteria/pathogens, phosphorus, and of course nitrogen. FEMA National Flood Hazard. Zone A indicates a 1% annual chance of flooding, 100-year flood zone. Zone AE indicates a 1% annual chance of flooding, but it also goes above and beyond and includes detailed studies that provide the base flood elevation, BFE. Zone X indicates an area with a 0.2% annual chance of flooding. That's what we call the 500-year flood zone. This zone represents a moderate flood risk compared to the higher risk areas like A and AE. Now, this is the accumulated insights we've gathered from our conversations with Concom, with Mr. Mark Minton and Chad. We know that Mendel Road is an area that has been highlighted multiple times for flooding concerns, and it must be prioritized for mitigation efforts. We know Slocum Street, their infrastructure improvements are underway, including upgrading water mains and storm drains to alleviate local flooding and enhance stormwater treatment before it reaches the river. Main Street, the retaining wall adjacent to the Acushnet River, is a chronic concern in terms of structural integrity and potential impacts associated with failure. Diggle's Curve near the transmission lines area, 444 Main Street, gets stormwater flows that run down from Perry's Hill. There's also wetlands in that area with multiple culverts. 232 Middle Road. This area near the Acushnet Library floods every couple years. It has a blind storm drain adjacent to a brook. The drain may not be able to handle the volume of water in the heavy storms. It requires evaluation. Hebert Road and Keene Road. These properties are vulnerable because the pond nearby floods on a regular basis. Their lawns, their foundation, their footings, their sheds, all of that is being damaged regularly. This area has no drainage other than country drainage. It is also a dirt road, and not a road that the town maintains.
That's just Hebert Road though, for the record.
Okay.
Hebert Road is a paved road. We installed a stormwater basin on it.
Oh, okay.
It'll be argued if it's working properly or not, if you ask certain residents over there, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
But Hebert Road is the dirt road. Keene Road is paved.
So for our last section, we'll be talking about the reservoir. The reservoir, known locally as Lake Street, is formed by a dam across the Acushnet River. New Bedford owns the reservoir and dam, a decision made in the 19th century to provide reliable drinking water supply for the city. In 2023, New Bedford and Acushnet signed an MOU to use the reservoir for recreational purposes since it is no longer used as a drinking water supply. Completed in 1867, the earthen dam is built out of blocks of granite under the soil, spanning 650 feet long and has a structural height of 10 feet. The reservoir covers 218 acres. The National Inventory of Dam labels the reservoir having a maximum capacity of 2,265 acre feet. State of the dam, so this was something that Jamie wanted us to really talk about in this plan. New Bedford DP, we had a sit-down meeting with New Bedford DPI to talk about this. They do annual routine dam inspections on their own. That includes like clearing trees, checking for erosion, ensuring the fishways are functioning properly. State law requires that DPI to complete major inspections to evaluate the dam's structural integrity and any necessary repairs and upgrades. Those inspections are done by tie and bond every 5 years in accordance with the hazard rating of the dam being significant, and the condition of the dam is fair. DPI recently developed an emergency action plan for the dam, which is in its final approval phase, and they're going to send that to us once we get it. And the Massachusetts DCR Office of Dam Safety regulates the dam. And then the fishway, it's a Danil fishway constructed in 2002. So this is where the reservoir dumps into the Acushnet rivers. This is where the fishway is. If you can see this area up here. Fishway was constructed in 2002 to facilitate the movement of fish species like river herring and American eel. Fishway designed with the concrete and wooden baffles to help fish navigate the dam. The Acushnet River Restoration Project has focused on improving fish passage at multiple dams along the river, including the reservoir dam. These efforts aim to restore healthy populations of diamerous fish that migrate between fresh and salt water in the river system. And down here, a couple of the creatures that depend on Acushnet's water resources: river herring, great horned owl, red fox, northern red-bellied hooter, and American eel. And we get the crowdsource map at the very end. When it comes to this, what we want to, for road improvements, we think that's where flooding comments should be put. Keep any recreational for water sources under open spaces, and then there is a sewer and wastewater. There's a wastewater and what is this one? I think it's just sewer, actually. And there's a comment for sewer. So any locations that you guys want to add on to there, we'll put those in. But now we just wanted to open the floor on the general direction that you guys wanted to go on these 5 categories that we outlined.
Anybody got any comments? Are you saying you want input from the committee? So we just got done talking about Lake Street ponds, right? And we know it's owned by the city of New Bedford, but there's a ton of residents. Obviously, it's a natural feature in our town, right? We want to do everything we can to protect it, but there's a shared responsibility between us, the town of Acushnet, and the city of New Bedford, right? And trying to navigate that. I think it's important whenever there's a natural body of water, regardless of the size of a pond or a lake or a stream, that it's protected, right? It's something that you can't replace. So I would, if you're looking for input from me anyways, I would say anything that's surrounding those ponds and anything downstream, all the way down that river runs from there, all the way down the road over here behind this PD, and dumps out into the harbor, right? I think it goes all the way to the Faven Mine with the harbor, so it's all going to be protected. So I don't think it's a good idea to, I know conservation, Mr. Resendes was on the chairman of conservation, and I've always asked the conservation to be very stringent when it comes to building anywhere near a body of water. For that reason, I think it's being outlined by you folks tonight, right? It's just not good, and we're hearing all that nitrogen stuff, but yet we still want to put houses close to a river with a septic system, right? Impacting and conflating that problem. So it's something that I'm very passionate about, is trying to do our best to maintain our natural resources. And when I say that, I mean any bodies of waters, lakes, streams, ponds, whatever it may be. You have to be stringent on that. And sometimes saying no to somebody for a development is the right thing to do. So, I don't know if you can make a little map and buffer zone all the way down that river, but I think
That's
Mr. Rezzendes, I'm sure, wouldn't mind chiming in on that. I mean, that's his forte, and he's the expert on it.
That's essentially what the PPA is. I mean, it's just, it goes all the way down.
How far, so on that, what's the green?
The green
These
is
are
the
the
priority
priority
protection areas that the
areas.
town highlighted.
So when I'm looking at the map, when we're developing a master plan, I'm looking at these little baby spots of white that's left to develop, right? I'm looking at it going, okay, well, we ain't got much left to go.
So,
I mean, it is what it is, right? Sooner or later, you're running out of space. It is what it is. You don't start crushing your natural resources because you're concerned more about money and revenue, in my opinion. But that green all around there is like kind of what you're saying is protected?
It's what the town, I don't know who was part of Acushnet in talking about the PPA, but the PPA PDA that we did was that everybody, we went to every town, and I'm not sure who was involved with Acushnet, but these were the areas that the town wanted to protect.
Right.
And I should say, the PDA, PPAs, the designations, they don't have any authority, so to say. It's just the town saying, these areas we
Right.
want to protect, or these areas we would like to develop. And it helps for, say, grant applications, because if you have a designated area as a protection area and you apply for funding to acquire that area, that gives you a more competitive application, for example.
Mr. Chair, I can speak to that. I sat in with the chairman of planning at the time. We sat down, I think it was Garrett King.
Grant,
Grant
yes.
King, Grant King. So we sat down, we had a meeting, and we highlighted all these areas, and I guess the purple's zoning would be.
That's development.
Yeah, developable or potential, areas for commercial or whatever, so that's an area that they focused on. There really wasn't too many changes from the last time. I did say paint it all green along the river, because I think that's important.
It is, that's excellent.
But yeah, so, and then there may be some potential behind PJ Keating, behind the quarry over there. There's
So
some town
the
there.
quarry for everybody's sanity is the big gold piece.
Yeah.
Right. And the town does own some land, and it does have upland, so, but the access would be the issue there. But, yeah, we talked to that. I guess a couple comments. So you said, for recreation, we'll talk about the water, during open space.
Yeah,
Okay, that's fine, I'll save that for that.
This will be more about protecting the water
I
resources.
guess my other comment would be, the MS4, and I know it's important, and the problem is with developments, whether it be a single-family home, the state of Massachusetts stormwater handbook doesn't require any stormwater for a single-family dwelling. So, you got a house that gets built here, a house that gets built there, next door, and then so on and so forth down the road. It's not the same developer, but as these houses go up, the stormwater infrastructure is not being built. So that's like a big issue that I see, but.
Is that causing flooding in the town?
There's so much flooding in town, yeah. There's a lot of flooding.
Yeah.
And then a lot of the old country drainage has been filled in from not being maintained, or filled in by the owner, and, driveway, instead of the culvert being put back in, it's just filled in and a new driveway goes in, So there are a lot of drainage issues in town.
So we want to talk about flooding a decent amount in this plan, but also you guys do have that hazard mitigation funding available, and we do eventually down the road, we want to do a real HMP where we can really focus on flooding issues.
Yeah, flooding in this town is definitely an issue, especially the last 2 years or something. We've gotten astronomical amounts of rain.
Mm-hmm. And another thing, especially like with the FEMA layers, the FEMA flood zone layer has not been updated in 15 years, I want to say. So like a lot of times these 100-year storms are happening every 10 years, and especially like as towns change and there's, if it rains, some years it rains more, if there's impervious surface cover. So there's a lot of flooding happening outside of like these areas that are highlighted. Pretty much the only areas that are highlighted are around the reservoir and around the Acushnet River, but we've already heard a ton of flooding happening all outside of these areas. So one of the things is it all MS4? Is it all stormwater drainage not being installed? Is that why the flooding is happening?
No, some of them are solar fields.
Solar fields?
So we had a massive flood issue off of Main Street on a solar field. And I think we still get flooding, and we had one individual's home, he was on a well, private well, and his property got flooded so bad he was spewing basically mud out of his faucets, and he was shut down, and we had to do an emergency. The chairman of the board standing right there, he took action with the DPW and brought it in front of the board to take action immediately to rectify that problem, and we unfortunately only had one solution, and that was to hurry up in time into municipal water caused by somebody else's development, right? It's a very unfortunate incident, but it happened, and we're still dealing with that same solar company, same flooding problems.
Where
We
is
just
that
strengthened
solar
our stormwater bylaws, actually. It was just, I had to push the town clerk to get the Attorney General to expedite our stormwater, either approval or denial, and reasons for denial, but we put a pretty strong stormwater bylaw in front of town meeting, and they passed it, and now we have some pretty good regs around how they build stormwater basins. It has to be 3 feet above groundwater.
Who's the best contact for us to talk about stormwater with?
My MS4 engineer would be Conoco Engineers,
Okay.
so I can give that information to Victoria.
Definitely.
They've been out doing some stormwater stuff and doing surveys of all the discharges and things of the like, so they're gonna actually come in front of the board and give us an update soon.
Oh, nice.
And there's some things that we need to continue doing to stay in compliance, because most people don't know that a town does have a small MS4 permit that we are responsible to uphold. We're not just pushing it on to everybody else, these individuals or developers, right? We have to comply, and we're spending anywhere between $50,000 and $100,000 for that compliance. It's a very costly thing nowadays, right? Again, unfunded mandates, but we have to do what we have to do, right? I think spending 50 to get things right and clean up our act is better than some of the fines that I heard would come down upon us if we didn't comply. And when we weren't in compliance, I had a conversation from a young lady from DEP and said, well, you can consider the alternative, which we find you nothing less than $100,000, Mr. Gasper. And I was like, okay, we're gonna get moving on that, then, right? So I'd rather spend 50 than get fined 100, right? So, again, it's something that we continuously go to town meeting every year and try to get 50 grand for MS4. And it's costly, right? And it's unfortunate, but it's today's world we live in.
Mr. Chairman, just from a
Mr.
my
Boucher?
board's perspective, solar fields, again, we get that big issue with the one we got already. We've still got 2 big ones on the table that are gonna be starting, and there's gonna be some massive clear cut that's gonna go on.
Where is that happening?
That is going on Park Drive, right up in that area, right there.
There's 7 on the books right now.
I know there's 7, but I mean, it just 2 big ones right now, Morse's Lane. Yep.
Park Drive,
Morse's
Lane to Bedford,
And Morse's Lane.
near Acushnet Avenue, 60 acres gonna get wiped out. Just below that is Deep Brook Estates, which hasn't been developed yet. Just below that, there's another solar farm on Morse's Lane, just under that.
Yep.
You're not even gonna be able to pass by Middle Road anymore.
So-
It's so bad.
We talk about
Have
runoff.
these been
and-
properties like purchased pretty recently, that these are all
You know, one of the big one off Park Drive, that's been in the family name for hundreds of years. They're one of the largest property owners in town. And then you have Deep Brook Estates that was just purchased off of a few years back, and it's been kind of tied up with development issues. So that's still moving along. I think it's finally back up, and there's some conversations going on. And you know, it was like a 15 lot subdivision, but now it might be 12 lots, but it sits at the bottom of that, what we refer to as Deep Brook Estates.
Yeah.
And that's where the clearing for the solar field is up. The topography is probably at nothing less than 5 or 8 feet above where Deep Brook's development roads, and when you clear cut all that forestry, it's just gonna,
I guess
unless they build
ultimately-
stormwater basins the right way and it holds, and I guess it could work, right? But ultimately, there's a lot of concerns amongst a lot of people And there's another solar field in the backside of Morse's Lane that all connects into that. It's like a big pie triangle. And if it all just goes and happens, it could be, if you get one of those big storms like we've seen in the last couple of years, it's game on for a lot of different people, and people that, you know, have been living in their homes for 50, 75 years could see potential flooding like the individual on Main Street, the unfortunate individual, I should say, right? They got flooded out. So
So I think the other issue is, you know, Acushnet has a high groundwater table,
Yeah.
poor draining soils, C&D soils. And these stormwater basins for these big facilities and also developments, you know, they're designed, they go through testing and then they're peer reviewed and everything, so we're going off of, you know, peer review requirements. And, you know, ultimately, that's all we can go by, but when you have, like Kevin just said, you know, 3 storms in a row, they may not be a 100-year storm, but they may be 3 5-year storms, you know, over a course of 10 days. You know, there's a large issue there with stormwater runoff, and it's been occurring. So, with already developed sites, so I guess there is the potential with, you know, who's to say? It may happen, it may not, but it is a concern about it, you know.
Definitely, I mean, that current bylaw, I mean, it just discourages clear cutting, but it's not gonna stop it. There's too much money in solar farm development, is the problem. And even though we put this new bylaw in place, we've got pretty much 6 or 7 of them right now are still not underneath the new bylaw, because the state said, guess what? Everybody's grandfathered in, and their previously established special permits will stay forever with no, they're an evergreen clause, which somehow we need to advocate and get rid of that. At least comply with when we went through great lengths to try to change what we had, and it seemed like we were kind of a community that was, for some reason, was attracting companies, and we get solar farms all over the place. So we had lost count how many what we got coming. We got some big ones coming, and I don't know how we can get them to change, to back that off, and at least comply, at the very least comply with our new bylaw, which is a lot more restrictive, rather than, it's like they got no respect for nature and preservation of it at this point, with everything else, besides some of the other things that are going on right now. And it's, again, as a rural community, been here for a long time, where, you know, it's, all that clear cutting was all the wildlife going, besides other issues of stormwater runoff. It's quite a heartburn at this point for everybody. You know what? There was no, I don't think anybody had any idea when these large solar arrays were starting to come in, and the issues that they were going to cause. So, and trying to get it and change it, and having the state turn around and say, yeah, it's acceptable, except everybody else that's already got their permits in, even though they expired. At 21, they snuck in an extra year on it, and then they came back last year and said it's indefinite.
And then this year, they extended permits for an additional 2 years with the Permit Extension Act. Concom, I don't know, I can't speak to special permits from...
Special permits in
Yeah,
the solar field right now are indefinitely.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. That didn't help.
No.
it doesn't help. That's what happens when this thing
I don't know how
says
we can-
it's a by right use, right? To what degree is it a by right use and overthrowing our zoning? And that's essentially what's happening to us right now, is our zoning is being thrown out the window because we have a mandate and we want you to put up 600 more new homes in your community. We don't care if you're building skyscrapers in your little town, just do it, shut up and listen to us. And that's gonna, again, probably a by right use. Just like solar was back in somewhere around 2010 or 12, that was considered a by right use. To what point do we say we have enough? And nobody's ever been forward thinking enough to say how much power does the town of Acushnet generate? Let's make you have to put in X amount of kilowatts or megawatts of power, get to a certain percentage, and that's it. It's no longer a by right use, right? There should be a cutoff, but they don't care. They just said, just wipe out everything and just make Acushnet solar farms. Who cares? They don't care. They just have a mandate that they want to meet. They don't care how they get there. They're just going to jam it down everybody's throat, and they can care less about the people. That's what it really comes down to in the end.
I think
That's not just Massachusetts, that's the New England Consortium too.
Get into that.
Green.
It's just getting harder and harder because they keep telling us like that. So let's go back to the solar thing that everybody's talking about, right? It's a by right use. And now we got a governor that's saying, no, you're gonna do ADUs, it's a by right use, you have no say in the matter. And then you're gonna say, oh, you're gonna come up with multifamily housing, it's gonna be a by right use, we don't care what your zone it is. Which one is it? We only have so much land space, right? I don't know what we're trying to do. I mean, the common sense approach is gone, right? And I always tell people the problem with common sense is it's not so common anymore, right? We gotta get back to common sense and think things through before the state government or the federal government just tries to slam things down people's throat without a lot of thought. Bring more people in the room if you need to. Have the dialogue, think about what everybody's saying and say, all right, you know what, that's a valid point, let's take a look at that. I mean, that zoning thing that they just did, the one they just came out with the 10,000 square foot lots, we go back to the unmerging of lots, right? But the Healy administration didn't even think for a second to say, and I talked to town council and he's like, yeah, you're right, they didn't do that. How far back do we go when we start looking at when lots were combined, right? It doesn't have any mention of that. So the zoning act was created in, I think it was 1976. At least put that in it and say, you know, whatever it looked like in 1976, if you were combined thereafter, okay, good. But we got people coming into the town now and, hey, look at my map from, 1901. Look, they were 3,000 square foot lots. I'm gonna make it into a 10 and I'm gonna build on it. But that's not really what the law states. So essentially what's really happening to us now is we're gonna be spending tens of thousands of dollars just in legal fees to combat this kind of development. That's what this is coming down to. I mean, I just got off the phone the other day with town council and he said, this is a complete nightmare and you're not the only town facing it. I said, I know I'm not, there's 351 cities and towns, but what do we do? What do you do?
And all that development is more impervious area without the infrastructure that, you know what I mean? You don't build a bridge and then put in the foundation afterwards. You need the infrastructure before we do all this.
It's very counterproductive.
You know, it's a constant losing battle to go back to the nitrogen thing again, right? We want you to build more houses. We're gonna let you build on smaller lots if they were combined back in the old days before you moved your zoning. So we did that in 1996, we went to 60,000 square foot lots. So you would think if that's what it was, you go back to that date and see what the lots were. Were they 10,000? Okay, fine. But again, you more septic systems, more nitrogen. It's like, well, you make me do this, but on the other side, it's making me do this. So which one is it? Do you want this or do you want that? And nobody's thinking about all the little things that they're throwing at you. They're just throwing it at you saying, just do it and shut up and like it. And that's the unfortunate part, that nobody's sitting there looking at the bigger picture and trying to resolve the problem that we have. Let's be adults, sit in a room, talk about it. And I think if you have enough adults in the room, you can come up with a better solution than what we're getting slammed down our throats right now, right? And I think it's going to take, several people to speak to our legislative delegation and maybe even send letters to the governor and say, stop it. Right? Before you keep doing these executive orders, stop, think about things. Right?
They had to at least throw some money at the executive orders for funding for infrastructure. That, again, it's, low interest loans, whatever it's going to take to get some of this stuff straightened out. We know we can desperately use sewer in these areas, but try to get almost a 0% loan or a very low cost loan at a 1 or 2% is not it's like non-existent anymore.
The state does offer, they're called SRF funds that you can go after for sewer. The problem is it's still pegged rate. I don't know what the interest rate is today, but a few years back when we were talking about it, it's 2%, but 2% of what number? 40 million, 60 million, right? I mean, you're not talking 2% of $100,000 anymore, right? You're talking 2% of 30, 40, 50 million dollars. That's a big nut.
It is.
So it's tough, right? I mean, like you said, if you're gonna stick this down our throat, then you give me the 50 million bucks to expand sewer and put that
Has
infrastructure in.
anything with sewer been done from this plan yet, or?
There's been no expansion from that. That plan was bought and paid for, I believe it was 2016 or 17 town meeting, through back tax collections that the Board of Selectmen did.
Is this still what the town wants to do eventually, even if it's just
It's,
some of it?
it is identified areas that are critical areas, we'll put it that way, right?
Yeah,
It is two big areas of the town that are, there's some of the oldest parts of town, right? We have the center of town, which is the oldest part of town, we call it the village area. So that's mostly all sewer now. And then the next oldest is the south side of town, and then coming up into this way a little bit. My neighborhood's developed in the mid-50s, early 60s.
And can I just make an additional comment? You mentioned funding for infrastructure. The state does have grants that communities can apply to in order to put in water, sewer. Those types of grants require, some type of commitment to development or redevelopment, whether it's economic development or housing. There are numerous cases in communities nearby that have been able to fund sewer expansion updates through those programs. So it is out there, you just have to have the
We
right.
got areas
pieces for
where
it.
without even having to add any more development in that need to be addressed before we can look at expanding, on that system, but like you said, this area, all the way up the south end of town, where they need it, because of the ledge, there's nothing to leach. And we was talking about the extra ledge, where was it? Right where it stops, at Pembroke Avenue. That's where they hit out, they come across that big swath of ledge, and that just...
But I think that's an interesting statement that she made, right? If we gotta be smart at how we look at grants, right? Because I always speak negatively about grants, and I only do it for one reason, is because it makes me sick to my stomach to think that the town, on behalf of the townspeople, we would apply for a $10, $20 million grant, and then it's, I gotcha. Because there's strings attached to it, right? So I think if we're careful and we can work with Serped or any other agency that's out there that we can explore these grant opportunities, I think it's interesting if we do look at economic development. I can already point to a section of area on that South Main Street area. If we could benefit all of those folks, and there's roughly 300 and some odd households on that phase, and there's roughly 300 on this phase. If we could capture something like that, and we will be going to the state, and I don't want to talk too much about it, but for an economic development opportunity on that side of town, it's interesting what she just said and got me thinking right away, is now I could have more dialogue with them off the record, and we can start talking about that, because if there's a way for me to tie that economic development into a sewer grant, it's a good chance that we, the Board of Selectmen, can do something really good and really beneficial for those folks on that south side of town, right? And in return, I will add this. The more people we add to that sewer, eventually, if you can do it at a very affordable price, and that was an interesting comment, so I'm really interested to dial into that one, but if we can do that, think about this. The roughly 9, and I know they said 1,000 sewer users, so it's probably up there. So last time I checked, it was somewhere around 960, we'll call it 1,000. Think about what that does, right? If I can tie in another 300, that'll be, I'm taking about a third off that, right? So when we have rate increases, or the current rate right now, that 1,000 current users slices that rate down, right? The more people you put on it, the solution to pollution is dilution, right? So think of it that way, right? The more people I put onto that system, I can keep rates lower, and I'm not hurting as badly when the city goes up 5%, 10% on a rate. We've been very fortunate to manage funds very well, the Board of Selectmen, when it comes to water and sewer rates, where we might say the city went up 10%, we're going up 3 to 5%, whatever it is, right? And we figure out ways to swallow the cost, cut costs and things like that. But think about what that would do for the current sewer users as well, right? So it's advantageous to expand sewer, but there's a balance at what cost do we do it, right? And I always try to do things as cheap as I can for the Acushnet residents, right? Because that's what we should be doing. That's how we should be thinking, right? Don't just say, don't worry about it. It's $30,000. You write it off over 25 years. People don't have that kind of money. So You know, there's always things at least going on inside this head that tries to calculate things and figure out the best way, best approach to
When
keeping
it
the
comes
cost
down to
down.
that, you gotta put it, because of them same people that were fighting the almost $15,000, which I'm on that extension, and that betterment. When we talked about coming over here in your neighborhood, people were jumping up and down, there's no way they wanted to spend 50, that 15 grand right now is peanuts compared to.
That 15 is now 30, my friend.
That-
When
that's-
Curran gave us that survey,
Exactly.
they gave us numbers projected for both of these two phases, and because I said it was roughly 300 on both
Yeah.
of those phases, my friend, they were talking anywhere in the realm, and that was back in 18-ish, 19-ish, they were talking 30 to 40 million, which was basically $30,000 to $40,000 per household. And I said, you're crazy, nobody's ever gonna do that. I'll put a new septic system in.
However, that's what I'm getting, the point I'm getting at is what is gonna happen again, as longer we wait, the more it's gonna cost, is what it's gonna come down. The numbers just keep getting, just exponentially larger.
Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Right. But
Um,
I'm gonna open up dialogue with these folks as soon as we're done. I don't have to waste all your time, it's just fun for me to get inside of their heads now and run with it.
One of the things this plan mentions too is the IMA for wastewater, which is different than the IMA for drinking water. I've not seen a copy of this wastewater IMA anywhere. Do you guys know where I can find a copy of that?
So the only thing I could reach out to, or Victoria can reach out to my DPW staff and find that out for you.
Because according to the language in this, it says that you would not have to update your wastewater IMA for, according to the needs areas, you would not have to update the wastewater IMA to hook up all these new areas, according to this plan. But with the drinking water one is different. Do you guys have any plans to update the drinking water IMA with New Bedford?
I haven't heard anything.
I think New Bedford said in that meeting that they want to work on updating it.
Yeah.
So I think they might be reaching out soon, but.
I can look into that one too.
And that was another thing we talked about, too, was New Bedford giving back the reservoir, ownership of the reservoir to the town of Acushnet.
So that conversation's already been had as well. Not made public, but here I am to make certain things public. So the problem with the city of New Bedford, when we did that agreement with them in 2023 to use the ponds, the lakes for recreational space, is that conversation came up by my members of my board and myself to see what we can do. The problem is I have numerous friends and people that I know very well that live along the lakes. And New Bedford will acknowledge it if you dig down deep enough that they technically don't own the land underneath of that water in all areas, my friend. Some people are deeded to halfway across that pond. So for them to turn, I think the only thing they could do is release the water rights that they have to Acushnet, but they can't turn over land or the ponds themselves because technically certain people's deeds read, I own to the center of that pond. So that's a
Don't
something
we
that
also
I-
have state agricultural water rights in play too?
Yes, there is. There's several, thank you for that. So there are several people that use those lakes for water, for bogs, apple orchards, peach orchards, and things of the like, agricultural uses. And they have permits from the state to draw from those ponds, right? Water rights. And that came up, if you need to get a good zoom in on that meeting, that came up, I believe it was at a Concom meeting, where those folks showed up, and they got a massive advocacy group behind them, the Department of Agricultural behind them, and I always tell people, you do not want to start screwing around with agricultural people and taking things away from them. I'm totally against that. I'm all about farming and agricultural. But they showed up and said, go ahead, put chemicals in that water, and when I try to sell my crop and it can't sell because they found chemicals in it, what town lawn, hall parking lot you want me to drop that off in? And I said, you don't need to do any of that. Nobody's saying we're putting chemicals in, just keep following the path. And I believe it was Concom, correct?
Yeah,
That those meetings took place and they reversed course and everybody said, You ain't using chemicals, and now we're talking about hydro raking the weeds, as you showed in that picture up there, how disgusting those lakes are. There's a lot of weeds in it, right? And that's really what the mission is, but again, here we go again, and I know we're not here to talk about money because it's a master plan, and I've gotten over that. I think Kelsey, Janet reminded me in the last meeting that that's really not what we're supposed to be discussing, that's not the mission, and I totally got it. I went home, contemplated that comment, and I agree with her 100%. That's not what it is, right? We'll worry about money when the time comes when we need to do the project, but right there, that's the mess that we have in our hands. But you know, and I'm talking to my board members too, to go back to the city and try to have a conversation with them, because in an old intermunicipal agreement, and I have multiple old intermunicipal agreements with water and sewerage from the city of New Bedford. I've studied them all. And one of them did say that they were responsible, the oldest one said they were responsible for the upkeep and the maintenance of those ponds. And lo and behold, they took it out, and it wasn't when the Board of Selectmen had jurisdiction over the Board of Public Works, it was prior to that. And every time they proceed, they kept changing things to benefit themselves and not be working collaboratively with the town of Acushnet. And that's one of them right there. So again, I look back and I'm here to represent the people of Acushnet and watch out for their money as best I can. And what I say is, why would I be spending $250,000 or $500,000 to get rid of y'all lily pads? This should be at minimum a shared responsibility.
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things for the OSRP survey. A lot of people for recreational uses, they want to go swimming, you know, in like the reservoirs. Are people not swimming in the reservoir because of the weeds, or is it a water quality thing?
I would not want to answer that question on public camera. I will divert that question to the Board of Health, because that's the sign says.
Okay, that's what I thought it was. Okay.
And waterfowl. Waterfowl cause a lot of the nitrogen and those weeds, you know, going from pond to pond, spreading that, kind of like a boat, you know. The milfoil stays on the hull, and then you go from one pond to another.
Very, very high iron content. I remember when I was a kid, before the waterfowl issue over there, we used to go, we used to take us down there swimming. It was the town beach at the time. Come out of the bathing suits were almost orange. Go down there, it was like, whoa.
So
Geese and ducks or whatever.
for some of us, we used to swim, and some of us used to
Dive
off the dike,
That's what one
the
of the
dam,
police guys was telling me about it earlier.
right? That was known as the pump house back in our schools, right? So, yeah.
So that
That was a long time ago.
That's something we could talk about in the OSRP more. Yeah.
Well, I don't know, I can't really answer the question of the sign that the Board of Health has about no swimming.
Okay.
There's been plenty of rumors about why,
Okay.
but as Mr. Boucher just alluded to, some people in the 70s were crazy enough to go swimming, and he's still alive and doing well.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's one of those things, right? But again, it's, no matter what you do, every time you turn a corner, you're fighting it. It's an uphill battle, right? And we try to do our best to do what we can with the resources that we have. But here we are looking at lakes, and I think everybody cherishes those lakes, and we want to see it cleaned up. But
Yeah.
you know, again, it comes back to at what price, and where's that coming from, right?
Yeah.
So, and again, there is a shared responsibility. If the city of New Bedford's going to maintain those water rights, then you have a shared responsibility. And I will find that old document and bring it to them and say, you used to do it,
Yeah.
right?
Do you think they just use their dam inspections to be like, oh, we do something, you know?
No pun intended. They don't do a damn thing about that water, okay? Zip. So whatever their, you know,
They're just doing what they're.
bridge inspections I've seen,
So-
the Hamlin Street Bridge is finally getting done, and they would show every year, they give the Board of Selectmen a bridge inspection report, and you'd see the big field stone, and it's like, so this used to be a foot crack, and now it's 2-foot crack, and I'm thinking to myself, and now it's a 3-foot crack, and now we got a new boulder being inserted inside of the crack, so it's so big, and I'm thinking to myself, at what point don't we just fix the bridge? And finally, the state is in here after, God knows, 15, 20 years of people from the town banging them off the head, they finally came in and did the bridge.
Yep.
So,
Does the DPW, they're in charge of the valves from pond to pond, because it does flow through and,
So we have access to the gate valves that do that, and there was what I call the northeast pond. That's really getting bad with weeds now. It's opposite of that one, it's upstream from that one, heading towards Main Street. There's a gate valve on the right side of the road that you go in there and you turn the old ship wheel. Because that pond this year in the wintertime was, fall time was overfilled with water. So I had to call them up and tell them you need to go and release that water.
well, I just saying that because you know, that's Acushnet doing maintenance, not New Bedford.
Yeah, I don't know
And
if
if
you
it's
call it
there-
turning a wheel maintenance.
Well, it is, I mean, yeah, the DPW guy went down to do it, so the town's paying for it,
I
so.
get it.
Does the New Bedford DPW, do they control the planks at the end behind Keith's?
Is that by the dam?
They didn't
is.
mention anything.
Yeah.
They're responsible.
So that would explain why the pond level has been kind of uncontrolled since Keith passed away. We might want to find out who's doing that, because we could get in a lot of trouble, because I know, like, I don't think the rivet wells are still in play on the other side, but those ponds have gone dry in my father's lifetime, both of them. And I mean dry down to where you can see stumps. So we may want to make sure that those planks are being controlled by somebody. I thought it was the state or New Bedford that did it forever, but it very well could have been Keith.
So you think the planks have been removed?
Oh, no, if they don't get removed or put in at right times of year, the water just flows out of the end of the pond, and it causes your water level to be considerably lower.
So
And
would
we've
they-
never had to move our suction box further out into the water as many times as we do now.
They never mentioned anything in that meeting about.
Of course they did.
Surprising.
I think they did.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they're responsible for the maintenance of it, but I know they used to access the reservoir through Keith's farm, and that since it's gone to probate, they haven't been able to. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
They
So
do, I know
that's-
they do have access.
Yeah,
Yeah, they do
so
have
they,
access.
just because the family, the two family members have passed, and the property was left to the Acushnet Faven Land Trust, correct? So all that is a simple phone call to Acushnet Faven Land Trust,
Which we had yesterday, 2 days ago.
and I'm sure that they would say if they need to do, you know, a dam inspection or look at outflows and things of the like. What's that lady's name?
Cora, you spoke
Yeah,
to Cora?
that's another person in our environmental department.
Yeah, Cora's great.
They're not gonna say, no, don't go on the property, I can tell you that right now.
She had all kinds of plans for Keith's Run. There's a lot, I had a lot of notes I have to read through for the OSRP. We'll go over all that for the OSRP. But yeah, as far as this, any other comments on water resources, wastewater, drinking water, stormwater, flooding, reservoir?
I got comments about open space and recreation, but.
Okay.
That's not the topic
I
tonight,
know,
sir.
I understand.
I would be interested to see flooding incidents around like the solar, if I can get all the solar farm locations.
Yeah, I'll send you a list.
Seeing
Absolutely.
where, if they're, like the flooding locations around there.
Yep.
Because that's a lot of what we do with HMP work that I do in other towns is we have people send in pictures of flooding incidents and we map them out. Because these FEMA flood layers are so outdated that, you know, and there's so many other conditions that go into like flooding like solar farms, which is a very new thing, you know?
Yeah, I'll send you that.
I would say Main, we had an issue, maybe it was last year or the year before, on Main Street, before Robinson Road, so I'd say from Robinson Road, what's that ice cream place?
The whip.
Yeah, so from the whip down to Leonard Street, and a solar field was blamed for the drainage. There was no clearing because it was a field. That's where we realized the country drainage was filled in, and the topography from Country Whip down to Leonard Street goes, you know, down gradient, and a lot of the water was building up over there. So that is an area of concern where there is no stormwater infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they definitely took a drain out at the end of Robinson Road in my lifetime, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and then along, so if you're headed north, I would say the east side of Main Street used to have some sort of swale there for drainage, and it's not there anymore.
Yeah. From one across Water Street, all that area right there. That's what they were playing at because.
I know that the chairman of the Board of Selectmen is working with council from next dam on some problem of flooding right there across the street where that entrance is for next amps
Yes.
to go up behind that house. The gentleman across the street is a low-lying house there, and he's been dealing with flooding, but you know what? I tell people all the time, look, the water table's so high. I got 2 sump pumps in my cellar since I was a little kid, right? I mean, the water table's high, and some people just have a high water table, so we can't just blame because somebody put in an access road. But it did make the condition for that individual worse. I get it, right? But 100% of the problem isn't coming from that. So I know he's working with council from the next dam to try to solve the problem, and then it turned into, we'll donate $10,000, and then there was some conversation, well, it's $50,000 if you want us to do X, Y, and Z and go down Leonard Street, and I'm like, whoa. We're fixing anything, the solar company can pay for the whole 50, not 10,000 of it, right?
Where's Leonard Street?
On Leonard Street?
On
It
here?
runs east to
So
west.
it runs, right,
Yeah,
so you
yeah.
know what Leonard Street is? What do you got?
Right here, Leonard Street.
Yeah, so Leonard Street's this other one, no, this way, right there.
Okay.
So it's right here, in the solar fields, going back there.
Yeah.
So it's right, this house is flooded now, because the access road comes up here and goes all the way, and this is gonna be a giant solar field in the back over
Yeah,
there.
there's no flood plain over here.
It's not.
It's all, I said, down on topography, you just run your drain into the wetlands, right? Instead of letting it go onto the road, you can put a culvert and redirect that stormwater or culvert into the wetlands. What do I know? I'm not an engineer.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
if I may, I mean, we're already kind of
Yeah,
running,
is that
but,
5X that house, then another house. and then-
I was at the first deep dive workshop, it wasn't a meeting. I think last meeting was a little chaotic, but deep dive number 2, I would suggest that we recap both of those for now that everybody's kind of settled in and we've actually have a board, the committee, which we didn't have the first one.
I did, I brought that up to Victoria and Serpent and asked them that, I know that we have the water resource on the agenda. I said, so my plan was to just go back, and then I looked at the agenda and I'm like, oh, 3, so what was 1? And we talked about 2, Victoria and I and the planning board chairman and members of Serpent. So I said I'd like to go back and revisit. So now we're gonna go back, and I noticed this is 3. So I just mentioned to her that we would go back and revisit 1 and 2, because technically 1, we weren't established a committee, that was a workshop. There was only 2 or 3 people there from this committee. So let's go back and revisit 1 and 2 again, because the last one, which it was kind of, things, we were just kind of getting organized, and it was a little bit of a circle. That was land use and economic development, correct?
Housing.
Number 2,
Which
so
is
we
the
definitely,
most important thing which is deemed the most important thing by the.
so we will go back and play catch up and bring the committee and everybody, right? Even myself, I don't have no idea really what was going on, so we're gonna bring those back and recapture those as well, and then we'll continue moving forward. So we can play some catch up. We'll figure that out, we'll coordinate, I'll coordinate with Victoria, and she can coordinate with Serpent on how we can maneuver into the next coming meetings and what we can get into one meeting. I did, and I would love to hear the opinion from the committee members, because I did mention that, I'm not for 2-hour meetings. I try to keep it to a 90-minute meeting at max, more preferably a 1-hour meeting, and see what we can get done. To certain categories that may warrant more time, that would be a 90-minute, but there might be smaller categories that we could do in an hour, right, to get through it. But I'm kind of all set with 2-hour, 3-hour meetings, right? So if the committee doesn't mind keeping to that, 90 minutes max, preferably an hour, but we can determine what it is and what the conversations are. Victoria and I will do a better job setting agendas together. We've had that conversation, so we're going to work together on future agendas and make sure that I'm pretty good at looking at things and figuring out times and length of conversation, so we can get through this stuff and get the information back to Serpent. So we'll figure out a little bit better routine as we get acclimated with ourselves and functioning as a body.
I will say this was a much better meeting than last one. Things got done this time.
It's because I was here.
That's good.
And I'll add one more to that, is that you guys being here and not looking at you through the screen makes a huge difference.
I agree, in-person meetings are
Yeah.
way better.
Yeah. It's a lot easier to understand and communicate. Do enough of that at work,
Yeah,
and
no,
it doesn't always work.
it's a good point, but you know, on the other hand, if one of them is, you know, they're not working just for Acushnet, and we've had that conversation as well, like Lizette, if she's, you know, I don't know, just saying born, doing something at then, she's looking at a time she can't get here, I mean, you
Yeah,
know.
I get that, but it's
It's
just,
something funny about.
No, it's outside of the
they're outside
region.
Yeah, but I just threw out
No,
a
I-
name, so Mattapoisett, let me use that one.
We go all the way to Wareham, so.
All right, Wareham.
It all depends
So
on
if
the
she's in
day.
Wareham, you get the picture, right? So it's kind of hard.
oh, I know, we do the same thing at work, right? It just, but sometimes it gets too easy to do things
Whenever
over
possible,
Zoom or Teams, you know?
we will make an attempt to be here.
Thank
It's a
you.
good point. We've discussed
I
the
appreciate
in-person thing as well, so I think we had a very good meeting the other day with the chairman of the planning board and tried to figure out and organize it so that we have a you-know-what together and we can sit here and be informational to the people at home and to Serpent and figure out what we are gonna go forward with and how the master plan in the future will look like, right? They will be creating a new one. Doesn't mean you can't look at the old one for ideas on these categories as we go forward. You can definitely look at the older master plan and say, you know, the old one on this category's got X, Y, and Z. Will that be in a new one under this category? And then have that discussion.
And just one other comment from the last meeting, something, I don't know if it was, I asked, Dave, somebody asked about presenting us with a master plan that you've already done, that another community's been implemented, so that we all got kind of an idea of what you guys are gonna be putting together. And again, give us some ideas on how we moving forward.
Yeah, I can send that out.
Yeah, just,
everyone.
you know what I'm getting at, this way here, we know what you guys are developing for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I can
basic- I
send
think
that out.
basic-
Especially if we're going all new, this
Yeah.
was, you know,
Basically, what we're trying to do is, I think what Mr. Uche's saying is, we know what this looks like from
Yeah.
2008. What we want to see is what a new version of a master plan looks like and what will be similar that you'll be putting together for Acushnet, so we can look at maybe Mattapoisett, right? Whoever's that's been updated in the last 3 to 5 years or whatever.
I'm gonna send you guys the Swansea master plan, because that one is one similar to Acushnet's, where along with the master plan, they did the open space and recreation plan. So it shows how those two plans kind of live together.
Okay,
thank you.
very good. All right, anything else? Do you have anything, Victoria?
No,
Nothing?
no, thank you.
Nothing? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Chair,
Oh,
I just,
Mr. Benoit?
yeah, my apologies, I'm too stupid to read 6 o'clock instead of 7 o'clock, and I'm so used to 7 o'clock with the finance committee. And on top of that, I went to the town hall, so, which there was already another meeting there, and it wasn't this, so my apologies to everybody, it was
First
just my
of all, Mr.
stupidity.
Benoit, you are far from being stupid.
Yes,
I appreciate you
tell my
acknowledging
wife-
that you messed up and looking at the agenda and then you're just so programmed, your car just drives you to town hall, right?
I thought you just went out of such a clock forward or something.
yeah,
Was it at least an interesting meeting, the other one?
no,
No, there was no-
they were just ending. My saving grace is I did have time today, so I reviewed the presentation that went out, so at least I have an idea what was.
So when I take off sometimes and I go somewhere with my girl, she'll take the wrong turn, she'll say, "Where the hell are you going?" And I'm like, "I'm just gonna take the scenic route, what's your problem?" And I'm like, "Yeah, where the hell am I going?" I'm like, "Wrong turn, Clyde."
Can't do that.
Well, that was it. Just my
happens,
apologies.
but you're so programmed going one way and, I don't know,
Yep.
it happens. Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are now adjourned.